Cool.
Ooh, just a second.
Yep.
Hey,
Hey, how you doing, man?
not bad, not bad.
Okay,
Um,
let's try this again.
sure. Yeah. So, is there like, let's start all over again?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So
Uh,
yeah, go ahead.
no, I'm just gonna say, it's my dear friend Hayan from TikTok. I if you could just start this off by introducing yourself, your background.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Hayan Amadi, and my pronouns are he, him, and I hail from uh, Syria, and I currently reside on Anishinaabe, Algonquin territory. Um, Yeah, so I just started like creating a few TikToks recently just on cross-pollination of different things that my experiences have informed, like leftism and some Canadian politics with some Syrian politics with some Muslim kind of pop culture for the Southwest Asian and North African kind of niche. And the reason we kind of got talking was about this like just like the background of what's going on in Syria. So um,
Yeah,
as
if
a
you wanna
mhm.
tell us a little bit about the before and after the Syrian Revolution and how it pertains to your immigration to Canada.
Yeah,
If you could
um,
touch on that a bit.
for sure. So before the revolution, like Syria, there was it was obviously a great country for tourists, for people, who just dropped by and came to visit like the nicest places and left after only like a couple of weeks or a couple of months. But and there was obviously like a two-tiered system where um, the wealthy were able to live like a much more comfortable lifestyle, and were kind of fine with maintaining the status quo. Um, but obviously if you weren't born into wealth, like opportunities were limited. And so we kind of grew up like in a middle class family, and my parents had already sort of set up like had already like gotten citizenship before I was born. So when I was born in Syria, like um, yeah, like I was already like a Canadian citizen. So I we lived there for a little while, and my dad just kind of, he felt like the pressures of the society just not like he could see, he could see like it tearing at the seams.
The
So
he could see the future unrest that was about to unravel.
even if it wasn't gonna, completely descend into anarchy, he knew that it was just not a sustainable, like a place where he would ever like really feel like he was, safe and secure.
Hmm.
So we have been here since 2002, and I like I've only gone back to Syria before 2011 twice to visit, and it was only for like a few months each time, and so I didn't really get to immerse myself into the culture, and I've gotten to know my nationality and my culture a lot more from a
How
distant
old?
place. Sorry, yeah,
Yeah, how old were you when you immigrated?
I was 5 years old.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
so
you essentially had to grow up uh, with Syria as a secondhand culture.
exactly. Yeah, I got to know myself. Like I got to know like my roots from Canada. Really, it was only until I grew up to high school and after the revolution that I kind of really started to looking into the history and understanding like the and started actually valuing it a lot more. Because I took it for granted before that, because I always felt like it was just, well, also because you're younger. You're not as political in general.
Hmm.
So a lot of lot of immigrants will obviously understand or have sympathy with this idea that you just come to another nation for opportunities, for benefits, for the security, the stability, but yeah, it, it's it, it's
Did
hard
you?
to, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask, have you dealt with any discrimination in Canada being Muslim and Syrian?
I mean, there was always the pressure to be, or like, have you heard of code switching?
I have not.
It's like where you kind of pretend to be more white and stuff. So like when I first moved here, like I was called, like I went by Daniel at school, and I kind of tried to like pick up like idioms and stuff like that, so that I could feel more like I was a part of the culture here. So I also, like, there was also like a, not a resentment, but just an obvious intention to kind of fit in, not to erase who I was, but to just be accepted. So thankfully, like I feel like I had the privilege of being not like white passing, but enough that it didn't always, like, it wasn't any kind of instant thing that people like. Yeah, like I feel like I'm privileged in that sense, like being a male and being you know I don't know, like, I guess fair skinned.
Lighter toned. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But otherwise, obviously, as soon as people like, as soon as I started going by Hayan in high school, and as soon as, even if my name was Daniel, as soon as people knew I was Arab and I was Muslim, like, if in middle school and stuff, when people tease you and stuff, like, they obviously would go to the racial jokes or the Muslim jokes first. But
Hmm.
other than that, like, no, I obviously, it's kind of just rhetorical stuff, and you kind of just go through an inner battle between your, like, what you want to value as a Muslim and what you want to value as a Canadian. There's always like a kind of, they call it like a clash of civilization, but that kind of perpetuates this notion that Muslims are not assimilable, which is obviously untrue. Like,
Hmm.
there are Muslims all over the world that obviously don't just live in one region. But yeah, like and in terms
There's
of
always.
external discrimination, I feel like Canada's been pretty uh, good to me as a male, as a straight male, as a Arab male,
Hmm.
Um, but
There's
obviously
always
that's,
the there's
yeah,
always the pressure from the culture around you to assimilate and
definitely.
to conform to the decided norms.
Of course, and it was easier for me to do that than a lot of people. So I'm like, I just want to, like, I acknowledge that privilege,
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but regarding like my actual nationality, like, people didn't even know what Syria was when I was like before high school.
Hmm.
There was a lot more like people from Lebanon in my city, and everyone knew what Lebanon was. So I would always just be like, oh yeah, it's this country next to Lebanon, even though, like, it's like much bigger on the map. But I would always find that funny, that everyone just knew what Lebanon was.
Hmm.
But yeah, like, that's how people know countries here. Like, no one in the West, really, well, I mean, not in the West. Like, I think Europeans are a lot more international, but in Canada and the US, there's this kind of
I
like
think it's
centrism. Like, you kind of, you become very oriented to just your own politics. You don't really look past your borders.
it's a I think it's partially proximity
Mm,
as well
definitely.
as which nation are we colonizing this year?
Yeah, yeah. There you go. That's another part too, is that they know Lebanon in reference to the fact that there was a lot of refugees, or there was or they know they know what
Hmm.
Iraq is because of the invasion, or they know Afghanistan because of invasion. So
Yep.
now they know Syria, sadly, because of invasion. And at the beginning, it was kind of just everyone knew Syria because, Bashar bad. Thankfully, like the narrative was very straightforward. When the Arab Spring began, it was just a very straightforward idea. All of these countries have corruption, or they're riddled with either corruption or like authoritarian right-wing like regimes. Um, and if you'll notice, like the monarchies didn't have revolutions; it was all the republics that had revolutions, right? Like, but it was the republics where the leadership was very centralized, where the leaders were very authoritarian, and where there was kind of barely a distinction between president and king, because you are feared, you are respected, you are held in high honor as if you are a king. So there's really no difference. But
Could
I feel
you
like, yeah, sorry.
could you take a minute and explain the Arab Spring and the role that the U.S. had in helping or suppressing it?
Yeah, I wanna start with like the way that it kind of sparked was in Tunisia. Like there was always a struggle between minorities. Let's kind of start with minorities in a lot of these states. They say that the first spring was actually in the Western Sahara, where I forget that. I think it's like the Polisario Front, and I don't want to like talk too much out of my ass here, but like there was a struggle between West Saharan, or no, I'm saying West Saharan, or let me just look this up very quickly. Are we able to like cut stuff?
Yeah. If it's too
Yeah.
much, I'll cut it.
Okay. Um, if it's literally a mistake, we'll cut this. But yeah, it's Morocco and the. I feel like it's called Western something, and I don't want to just call it Sahara because it's literally Sahara. Like Sahara is desert, right? So it's
Yeah.
it's the deserts in Morocco, and so yeah, like there was a struggle between the Moroccan regime and the Western Saharans, and let's not. I don't want to get into too much into that because I'm not too informed on it. But I just want to say that I feel like I've heard it said that that was actually where the revolution started. But what's most understood and what's mostly circulated and what's mostly widely accepted is that it really started in Tunisia, where a guy who sold fruits at a fruit stand was really frustrated with government corruption. I think his fruit stand, like the police or something had done something to his fruit stand that had made him not able to sell anymore. So he lit himself on fire, and that was the spark to the revolution, and it was called the Jasmine Revolutions because jasmines are like this like beloved flower in Arab culture. Yeah. And it's the spring, right? Like spring is flowers, and so
And
they
now
started in.
this
Yeah.
spread to how many different countries?
Honestly, I love saying this because it applies so well here. Those who say don't know, and those who know don't say, because
Okay.
because because every revolution was suppressed, every single one. So what you already were seeing was just what made it out. You know what I mean? So there's so much control over institutions, over media, over even like I was just speaking to someone who fled Syria, and went to Lebanon, and then like now moved here, and she was telling me about how even her teacher was like he pretended to go to protests during the revolution, and he would keep students on lists to know which ones were anti-Bashar, and she said that they would disappear, like all of her friends would fucking disappear.
Jesus.
So like you literally could not trust anyone in the environment that you're, even before the revolution and even after the revolution, because like it wasn't just 2011. Like every single regime has had struggles. So for example, in Syria in 1982 there was a breaking point in Hama where I think it was somewhere in the range of tens of thousands of people were killed because of an uprising that took place in the city, and no one ever got over that. Like that stained the Assad legacy forever, and that was his dad, right? This was Hafez Assad, not Bashar. And in 2000, Hafez died, and Bashar took over, and during the first like transition phase, like everyone was wondering like, oh, like is it going to be like a liberal like era? Are we going to see like more new reforms and stuff? And at first, like, you know, he brought internet, he liberalized the economy a little, he opened it up to foreign investment, um, which is another thing, is like he was not like, yeah, we had one of the best public health or public education institutions in the region, not the Arab world, but even that is a very, very low bar. So let's like, I always try to not um, like not give people any kind of impression that Syria was actually like, because like a lot of people who are very proud of Syria, and I am very proud of Syria, love to kind of say like, oh, it was this like burgeoning democratic secular society with you know, multiculturalism. No, like, yeah, we had that, and we still have a culture of secularism, we have a culture of diversity, but it was not a flourishing like unemployment was going down every year before the revolution. It was not a great like a great city to actually like start a business or something, like, sorry, a great country to always to exactly start a business, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so he opened up the, like, Bashar in 2000 opened up the economy a little bit to foreign investment, and you know, a lot of people saw this as, you know, a great sign, but a lot of people also understood that it's just like, you know, it's a calm before the storm for sure, because like there's not like you just grow kind of jaded towards these regimes, you know, like you just know like there's always going to be like an underhand, just like in any political regime, right? West, east, but obviously in Syria, like dissent, criticism, satire on the TV, none of it is allowed, right? And it's literally like, people don't understand when I don't know if people understand this when I say it, that Syria is literally an Arab North Korea. Like there's no freedom of the press, there's no like free journalism or anything like that. The advent of the internet, like, I don't think a lot of people even know that there's a firewall in Syria. Like a lot of people just, when they hear firewall, they think China. There's literally a firewall in Syria too. There's a lot of countries that, and like a lot of countries uh, in the Arab states, like they do the same thing. They monitor they surveil like everything you do. They block certain websites and everything like that. Um, so yeah, like there's a culture of just acceptance. Like you surrender to it, and you never try to get too political or anything. And the powers that be are just the powers that be, and you never really try to interrupt that. And to a certain level, if you don't, you can flourish. Like some people are, you know, they live a middle class lifestyle, and they are subject to like they might not see the corruption in front of their face, but for example, like the police are all loyalists, right? So they all like back the president and the regime, and so you can be subject to inspection, arbitrary arrest. You can be connected to another dissident you don't even know, just because like you were seen with him at some point in your life. Like they can get you for anything. Like there's no justice system, you know.
Police
But
don't really need a reason to arrest.
right, and this is not unique to anywhere, but in Syria, like when you know that there's no independence of these institutions whatsoever, like literally as soon as they find out that there's dissident anywhere, like they can just take him without cause or anything. Like you just grow up not caring anymore. You don't think about politics. You, even if you see somebody like getting the life beaten out of them, you walk away because you don't want to. Why would you want to involve yourself in that? Exactly. And so even in a situation where like you're with your family and they're telling you something about the regime, you're worried that they're going to go and say the same thing in another room, and someone's going to go and find out that they are like someone is going to go and rat them out, and you're afraid that if they get caught, that you're going to get connected to them. So a
Hmm.
lot of people will actually rat out their own close personal friends or family members just out of fear for being connected with them. Do you see what I mean?
After generations of oppression and this kind of constant torment, people just are forced into a position where they have to just accept it and be complacent.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's hegemony. A clear like it's a clear like um it's like the sunken place. Like you're just observing whatever happens politically. You just clean up the next day and you get along. If you're alive, if you're missing a limb, whatever, that's it. You just keep clean. It doesn't matter. It is the way it is. You're not going to change anything about it. You just keep like you'll see people like just in the roughest conditions that'll still defend the regime there, and it's sad.
Because it can always get worse.
Exactly. There's always well, okay, and so this is a problem too, is that this is what has made me kind of become like you kind of come to see that the state didn't just start out with blood. Like the state is reinforced with blood. You never have a like how we say like, oh, like we can't change the past whenever we're talking about um uh indigenous ethnic cleansing and stuff like that that founded the country, or slavery,
Hmm.
for example. Like we think about countries only being born in blood because like, oh yeah, we're not genociding people right now, but we are repressing people to embrace nationalism. Always,
Hmm.
there's always, if you're crushing dissent, you are you are you are always like enforcing this idea of the state through blood. And
Hmm.
that was like a huge realization to me, was that even like the most pure state, if it's a police state, or if the police are only loyal to the regime, like then the state is corrupt. Like even if it's the best state ever, even if it grants you every right and freedom, if you're subject to arbitrary arrest or if you can't dissent, like there's no worth in nationalism or anything like that.
Hmm.
So
It's just worship of the state at that point.
yeah, exactly. It's only seeks to serve itself. There's no justice being done there. Yeah. Um,
Um,
yeah.
at what point did um did any sort of revolution start to kick off for Syrians?
The direct date that is associated to the beginning of the revolution is March 15th, 2011. That was when child, a young teenager, like graffitied after Hosni Mubarak. Like, so the revolutions kind of went in a domino effect. Like the first one was like a week or 2 weeks, and then Egypt was like a month or something, and people were like, "Whoa, like that took forever." I remember like it taking a month, and people were like, "Oh man, like Hosni Mubarak really held in there." And then um, and then when it happened to Bashar, we were like, okay, like he's not gonna take long. Like he's not more strong. Like he's not stronger than Hosni and Mubarak. Like we
Uh-huh.
felt like he was like way less likely to, but no, like he held on very, very tight. And uh like America had an interest in kind of redrawing the relationships in North African countries, but from what it seems, I guess in Syria it didn't really have a huge interest in it, and Russia had a much bigger interest in maintaining its current relationships there. So that's why you kind of saw um, a lot more intervention in Libya, a lot more intervention in Egypt, where now, even though they got democracy for a year and um, voted in a like the first democratically elected leader in years.
Hmm.
Within a year, he was couped again. So um, yeah, but but where it stands with Syria, so the kid in 2011 March 15th, like people were just like things like this had happened before, but people were just like always silent about it because, like I said, there was just a culture of you wake up the next morning and you just let it go. You just can't do anything about it. But this was a 15-year-old boy who had just graffitied after Husni stepped down, saying, "Your next doctor." And Bashar al-Assad was a doctor. He studied to be an optometrist, I think, in England. So he wasn't even like he didn't even study in like Syria or anything, because his brother was supposed to be the president, but his brother died in a car crash.
Okay.
So yeah, so his after his brother died in a car crash, he maybe had like 3 years, I think, to be ready, and then his dad died. And in our great democracy, of course, when a dad of the when the president dies, of course, it goes to his son, right? The
Yeah.
presidency in our great secular democracy republic. Um, yeah, so it went to the son, even though it wasn't even the son that they had been grooming to be the next dictator. So so yeah, so he took the reins, and he was educated in England, and his wife is from England. Like she's literally like she's not even like she's from, I think her parents are from Syria, but she's even like born in England. And people like hail this guy as like the Arab hero, the hero of all Arabs. You know, the Syrian
Well,
Arab
he's just.
army. You know, like he just loves to bury himself in glory, you know, and in valor. But he's obviously a fraud.
Mhm.
Um, so
He had this. He had repercussions for this child that
yes, I
graffitied.
keep forgetting. Yes, this poor child was after he graffitied, like he was caught, and his parents got his body back after 2 days or something, or 3 days,
Right.
and his body was not like it wasn't it was mutilated, and there was like cigarette burns and like limbs or like like all signs of torture that you could imagine, because like
Yeah.
brutality is the point, right? Like you want to send a message, like anytime anything happens, you what is it like carry you what is that like saying, you know, you carry a big stick. You don't make any kind of public announcements or anything. You just
Hmm.
make a very clear show of force that is unacceptable what he did.
The
And
cruelty is the message. Yeah.
exactly. He doesn't need to make a speech or anything like that. He just lets it happen, and then he'll deny it. He'll do this, he'll do that. He'll put out like all of these, oh, he was like a radical, or oh, he was like a extremist or something. Dude, he was 15 years old. Like he was just coming back from school or something, you know.
Well, it's like
Um,
in the West when we
yep,
have a
yep,
radical dissident.
absolutely.
It's the media that portrays them as a criminal
Yep,
in whatever way they can,
yep. And a
while
lot
the
of
state
people
disappears them. Yeah.
and a lot of people so they talk about like how it's Islamophobic to pigeonhole someone as an extremist because they're Muslim,
Hmm.
because like Syria has a secular culture, and a lot of people who were part of the protests were not Muslim. Like in 2011, it was not a Muslim revolution. The Arab Spring was not a Muslim revolution. In fact, usually the figureheads of the revolution would be Christians, or they would be like minorities like Kurds, for example, who were always like leaders of like the solidarity movements, because for the very fact that like in Syria right now, who's the president? An Alawi. Alawis make up 10% of our population. We've always put the minorities in places of leadership for fear of the majority becoming oppressive towards minorities, right? So
Hmm.
like we even embraced that part of our culture of holding up like the of not letting the majority, which is the Sunni Syrian like Muslim population, which is about like 70 to 80% of Syrians. Like we don't allow. We never like they never had too much power within the revolution in 2011. Before like it's one of those things like you never obviously like we don't talk about it or anything, but I feel like that is kind of what ends up happening in Syria, where we just have this sort of internal and I don't mind being criticized on this point, like, but I think it's a lot of internalized Islamophobia, literally, where if we're given a narrative like oh, he's an extremist or something, like oh, people will actually like eat that up, you know, because they don't want to be considered extremists, so
No,
they'll shun somebody else. You know what I mean?
it's a
And you see
narrative
it
that
in
we've all been fed for
yeah, but
generations.
even if they're Muslim, that's what I'm saying is like a lot of people, even in Canada, like if a black cop arrests a black person and people were like, "Oh, how's that racist?" You know, well, there's a lot of internalized racism. Like you'll
Hmm.
still perceive things even of your own race in a light that's not like that's still fed
Yeah,
by a
yeah.
narrative that was not genuine, that is literally given by the colonizer or by the oppressor or by so
A person's identity doesn't uh, deny their ability to have bigotry.
yeah, exactly, or to show prejudice or to
Yeah,
to judge people,
I
so
mean,
yeah.
at least here in the U.S., we have the first black vice president ever, but
Hmm.
she's a cop. You know,
Yeah, yeah, and
so
uh
she made a
she
living
made a lot of
persecuting minorities.
exactly, unfortunately, and she passed a lot of people up for like uh I heard like death sentences and stuff like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um
Anyways, as
so
far
so
as the revolution started on March 15th, 2011.
yeah, it, it kind of it got drawn, like I said, like the Egyptian revolution was like a month, and then Hosni Mubarak like stepped down, and then Syria just took 1 month and 2 months and 3 months and 4 months, and it kept going until the regime started shooting live rounds into the protesters, and people started showing up to protests with like self-defense, like with they armed up, they got ready before this, they anticipated it now,
Hmm.
so they started to go out and defend themselves. And this happened more in like outskirt cities, like where there was less like, because Damascus is like the stronghold of Syria, like that's where Assad lives. That's where his empire is. That's where his kingdom is. He literally has like a mansion built by like a Japanese architect. It's worth like a bunch of money, and it's like in the middle of Damascus, and there's like a moat, and it's crazy. It's in between hills and stuff. So it's a fortress. You cannot
Hmm.
invade this guy. So Damascus held out for too long, and like you see with Afghanistan right now, like Kabul fell like very quickly, but
Hmm.
that would never have happened in Syria with Damascus, because like our central government was so loyal to Assad. Like you hear about how a lot of cities in Afghanistan, like they conceded, or a lot of them like just were overwhelmed, so they just didn't fight. Like a lot of people in Syria were willing to die for Assad, and and that's that's literally to preserve the status quo, so that they
Hmm.
you know so that they can protect like the stability of just having one reliable, consistent, tyrannical leader,
Hmm.
rather than an unstable democracy that hasn't found its footing, that might be used as a puppet state or something like that. Like people were obviously very ambivalent about these two realities, these two very apparent realities. Like people like in Syria, they grew up with Iraq right next door, and they grew up with they literally saw like what was happening in Libya and everything, and they still rose up. Like when people say like, oh, like the revolution, like you should be great. Like people, they don't say like you should be grateful, but they kind of put it in terms that say like, oh, like you're better off this way, because if Assad was gone, like look at Libya, you know what I mean? And it's you're like a lot of people, especially if you're not Syrian, like shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that's
you
not your
can't.
place. That's not your place to say at all.
Yeah, deriding one dictator doesn't um, forgive the imperialist machinations of another nation.
Mm, And that's not the thing. Is like a lot of people talk about Western or U.S. Intervention, but throughout the whole endeavor, Assad has called in backup from Iran, has called in backup from Hezbollah, has called in backup from Russia. So all of this intervention is happening not democratically, because obviously Assad does not represent the people if he's literally using these reinforcements to fight the people. And so the people cried out for help, and Obama responded with his red line policy. So he said that if he uses chemical weapons, like that's a red line, and there will be intervention. But Syrians didn't want that. Like Syrians wanted help now. Like they didn't want, because that's literally like when you talk about a red line, you're already saying I'm waiting for you to I'm waiting for you to cross a red line in order
You're saying you
to
can do
help you.
anything, like, just don't do this.
But you're also saying that I'm not going to stop you if you do this until you already
Yeah.
have done it. You know what I mean? It's a great concept that relates to this is called the Gandhi trap, and I recommend anybody hearing this to look up the video on YouTube. It's by Innuendo Studios, and it talks about um, the problem with nonviolent revolution or nonviolent protest or nonviolent struggle is that, or hunger strikes, for example, is it's like the Gandhi trap. You're asking somebody to put themselves in harm's way
Mm-hmm.
to prove a point, to prove that they are like worthy of validation. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
sorry
like
that.
how liberals will complain about the Black Lives Matter movement
Mm-hmm,
and complain about destruction of private property, and
exactly, exactly.
then point to the whitewashed version of Martin Luther King that everyone's content with.
The content
Never,
of my
yeah,
character.
yeah, never minding that not everyone wants their skull bashed in by a baton. Not everyone wants
Exactly,
a fire hydrant opened up on them. Not everyone wants
exactly.
attack dogs sicked on them.
Absolutely. And it's not like, obviously, it's very brave to do that, but we shouldn't have this fetish of having to put ourselves in harm's way to prove a point.
No.
Like, what happened to just believing in what your eyes are telling you,
Mm-hmm.
like, or believing in the people that are like raising their voices for the first time in 4 decades to this regime that has already like suppressed every kind of dissent we could possibly have, and they still like rose up. And people deny that. Like people are like, oh, like if he's so bad, like why isn't he gone already? Like, man, there's so many reductive things that I've heard
Yeah,
that are just horrible takes about this
that
revolution. And
also that doesn't help.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Could you
on to,
oh,
should I go ahead?
sorry, go ahead.
No, please, please.
Oh, I was hoping you could give me a little background on the Kurds and their historical oppression and their fight for sovereignty.
Yeah, so after the first year of the revolution, the second year kind of became more like the revolution started to fracture a lot more. This is where the fundamentalism started to draw in, and the instability of Syria presented a huge opportunity for people around the whole world, not even just the region, who were, who romanticized this idea um, of an Islamic State to just seek out Syria or Iraq as like this sudden utopia where they can try to make this dream possible. So there's a lot of people that say that the US brought in these people. There's a lot of people that say that Israel brought in these people. There's a lot of people that say that Bashar brought in these people. There's a lot of people that say that the Gulf funded these people. There's a lot of people that say that the Turkish government funded these people. So there's honestly so many narratives being um, spread around his, and I don't like to. Obviously, facts matter, but in a conflict that has obviously a lot of information and counter information, propaganda and counter propaganda, um, state-backed narratives and imperialist narratives. It's very difficult to try to suss out facts when you're
Mm-hmm.
literally talking about states who have worked decades and even centuries in the art of manufacturing evidence and manufacturing narratives and manufacturing propaganda. So,
And
so
everyone has a stake in whatever information you receive.
exactly. So the fact is that fundamentalists, uh, like the civil war, like the revolution became a civil war. The civil war included fundamentalists, included the original revolutionaries who defected from the Syrian army or who decided to join the Free Syrian Army because of the revolution happening. And you had kind of a break off between like where it was a kind of a mix of these two. So it was like religious people who were still like just kind of Syrian dissidents that were like willing to ally with the fundamentalists. Okay, and so that's kind of a sectarian analysis. But then there's the ethnic analysis, which is um, uh, the um, the Kurds and Arabs and uh, like um, there's also like Druze and there's Greek Orthodox and there's Assyrian and there's I'm forgetting one. You know, yeah, but so all of these demographics, like basically, Arabs are majority. Kurds are the second largest ethnic group. Alawis, I think, are yeah, they're a sect. They're not a race, so they are Arab for the most part. But I'm part Kurdish and I'm part Arab, so it's not like we're a melting pot. You know what I mean? A lot of people like you'll talk to Kurds who are anti-Kurdish sovereignty and pro-Arab nationalism. You'll talk to Arabs who are, who embrace all of this. Sorry. Um,
Yep. Go ahead.
yeah. Sorry, I just got a call. Um, I ignored it though. It's okay. Um, sorry.
It's
Yeah,
all right.
so there's a lot of demographics and demographics is destiny to a certain extent in the Middle East, or sorry, and yeah, like the Middle East is kind of a term that people are trying to uh, change, by the way, like because it's Middle East in reference to Europe or Middle East in reference to the West, and to kind of take back an identity, we're like a lot of Arabs have taken to saying Southwest Asia and North Africa.
Okay,
Um,
that makes
yeah,
sense.
just like a little info there. So yeah, so in once the revolution kind of split up into a civil war, and it was kind of it stops kind of being the Syrians versus the like the Syrian army versus the opposition. It kind of became more of a um, three tier, like three sides of the war. So the fundamentalists were fighting both so that they could kind of have their way. Syrian army was fighting both so that they could have their way, and the opposition was purely fighting the Assad regime and would clash with the fundamentalists. But there was also like non-aggression pacts, right? And then I believe the like um, like once there was a lot of uh, international backing on both sides, like America backed the opposition and Russia and Iran had backed the regime. That was kind of a catalyst for a more secular separation of the Kurds to because now they had kind of the support from the U.S. to stand on their own. They didn't really need to stick around the Arabs or like the Arab nationalists or the fundamentalists at all. So they just split off, and that's why there was the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF,
Mm-hmm.
and they held an autonomous region that's known as Rojava. And Rojava just means west, I think, in Kurdish. There's several Kurdish languages, by the way. I'm not sure which one that is. Like there's, uh, but yeah, like um, uh, where
And
was
this
I?
is
So
when the
mhm.
YPG and YPJ play a significant role.
Yeah. So I'm not entirely like I know that the Kurdish movement in Syria is allied with the I don't want to put my foot in my mouth, but they're allied with the Kurdish movement in Turkey, which, as I'm aware, is YPG, YPJ, PKK. Well, people accuse it of being allied with PKK. PKK is um, more more considered like extremist in Turkey and in Syria. So um, yeah, like it's a civil war, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of gray areas here. And speaking of gray areas, there are outlets that try to um, portray it as a very black and white uh, issue, as if
Yeah.
it's purely Assad versus the fundamentalists.
Hmm.
But as you've heard me just like for the last 45 minutes, I've been explaining the breadth of diversity
The
within
complexity of it. Yeah.
exactly, but you'll still have people who say that Assad fought off U.S. imperialists, and these U.S. imperialists were like backing the jihadis. You know what I mean? Like this is the overwhelming narrative that I hear from leftists, at least
Hmm.
from like leftists who you know consider themselves anti-imperialists or Marxist-Leninists. Like they you know uh, if you're a fan of Juche, you like you might be a fan of Baathism. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not. It's like that was the narrative coming out of the protests in 2011. So it's a very old narrative. So right when people started protesting, we were like they were always smeared as um, extremists, as wanting to be like a new Islamic state way before anything of that nature even arrived in Syria. Like in June 2011, like 2 months after or 3 months after the revolution even began, when it was still just completely, peaceful protests and demonstrations against corruption and pro-democracy. They were already saying that these people are bacteria. These people need to be wiped off of the earth. Like they are,
Yes.
like they're just Salafists. They want to kill you minorities. Like because that's another thing is Assad loves to appeal to like the
In-
the
International
world
racism.
exactly well, not just that, but into the international world by saying I'm defending the minorities. These are the majorities. Like this is the majority that wants me gone. But if I stay, I'll be saving the minorities. But like I've said before, we have a culture of multiculturalism, of diversity, of secularism.
And
We
that's there
like and
regardless of
ex-
Assad. Yeah.
exactly, and the protests were anti-authoritarian in nature. So if another regime that came up were to be anti-authoritarian, the protests were not even just about Assad; they were about authoritarianism. So
Hmm.
whoever came next, if they were fascist, if they were whatever, like that would be the next uprising. Um,
Well,
so yeah.
it's similar to the way liberals would complain about BLM movements
Hmm.
during, um, say, a democratic election. You know,
Mm,
they're going to say that these people are going to cost us this election, and it's
mm,
kind of similar to how certain leftists will see an opponent of the U.S.
mm,
and just automatically cling to this idea that they must be our friend.
exactly. Absolutely. And there's a great video that I also love to recommend to people by Bad Empanada. It's anti-US is not an ideology. And I think that's a huge trap that a lot of like anti-imperialist leftists fall into, that they read a lot about anti-imperialism and then they just regard everything through the lens of US imperialism.
Hmm.
Like, yeah,
Yeah,
of course, there's US hegemony in the world, but
that's a
that's
beautiful thing
very
to say.
Eurocentric.
That really touches home. Anti-U.S. is not an ideology.
Hmm. Definitely. Yeah. So last part, I kind of like, I don't want to like take on any more than about like 10 more minutes, if that's okay.
No, that's fine.
Um,
You got
so
all night, man.
I appreciate it, but no, I want to like keep it a tight 1 hour if that's cool.
Yeah.
Um, just to explain one thing is about the flags. So um, to like so the Kurdish movement, they've got their own colors, which are yellow, green, and red.
Okay.
Um, and Syrians, our flag has been several colors, but consistently most Arab countries have the flag of red, white, black, green. And in Syria, in particular, our flag is was the one with two stars and the red top, and this has
Okay.
come to signify loyalty to Assad because it was the flag that was adopted ever since Hafez, Bashar's dad, took power, and it's the flag that flies everywhere you go in Syria just to reinforce nationalism, along with a picture of Assad wearing like some aviators, in his military uniform. Like this is the kind of country we live in. Okay, so the green flag was the flag of independence that we adopted after we stopped being a French colony. So it was our independence flag. And it was also the flag right before, I believe, Hafez. And it's come to just signify a time of where Syria existed, where al-Assad was not synonymous with Syria, because the regime has taken over all Syrian institutions. That basically Syria and al-Assad like are what's the word?
He's taken over the culture. He's the culture
No, no,
now.
no. It's like it's literally biosynchronous or whatever. You know what I mean? Like they've
Synchronicity.
literally, yeah, like they've completely entwined each other into the economy and everything.
Hmm.
So the flag has just come to signify a time in Syria where there was no Assad, and um, it's the flag that is uh, is on like the Free Syrian Army, which has been kind of the front of the opposition, um, and it was the one with the Syrian army defectors, which were which like I said, like they began with a very straightforward narrative of just being anti-corruption, anti-authoritarianism, anti-Assad, and then everything just kind of got fractured, and unfortunately, like it's just been now like just the declaration of being anti-Assad has become immediately pigeonholed into meaning a bunch of different other things that it
Hmm.
does not mean.
Yeah.
And so that's like the main thing I kind of want to get out of the way. So if you ever see people carrying the red Syrian flag, just know that usually signifies like it signifies that they either love Assad and they are like reinforcing Syrian nationalism with
Hmm.
Assadism and Baathism, or they at least like because there's no emoji for the green one, so like it's just understandable that some people will just use it just like that. But if somebody is using the green one and if they are proud of it, no, they are not associated with any group or any organization. Just
Hmm.
know that literally just signifies a big middle finger to Assad. That's it.
Excellent. That's good to know.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Can you tell us where we could find you online?
Yeah, my name is Hayanami. You'll find me literally on every platform, spelled the same. Um, right now, I'm most
H.
active on TikTok and YouTube. Yeah, Hayanomie. It's like
Excellent.
Hayan and enemy.
You're on TikTok, Twitter.
Yeah, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube,
You
Reddit.
got a you got a YouTube channel that you want to
Yeah,
promote?
yeah, yeah. That's everything is the same. All
Okay.
platforms, Hayanami.
What do you do on YouTube for the most part?
I'm building my platform on TikTok right now, and I'm just
Hmm.
uploading my TikToks there just to start with like shorts, and then hopefully I hope to get into more video essays where I talk about stuff like this in a longer format. But right now, I just like I want to build like a platform, an audience, so that I would um, at least like be able to invest time in that with the knowledge that like it's like there's an audience for it. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. This was
Yeah, yeah,
fascinating. I Every time I interact with you, I learn something new, and I'm just so grateful that you're willing to educate me in all these matters.
yeah. And you've been a great listener too, and I appreciate you taking interest in the matter and giving me like a chance to speak on it and being so, yeah, like you're a wonderful listener and uh, yeah, I hope everybody like listening like lets me know if they have any comments, any like questions. I'd love to, discuss this further with anybody. So yeah, feel free to let me know, guys.
Fantastic. Awesome. I'm gonna expect you to come back on at a later date. Got it?
Sounds good.
All
Appreciate it,
right.
man. Thank you
Hey,
so much.
thank you. Bye bye.
Appreciate it. Take care. Have a good night.